the last few slides, we will talk about how do developmental scientists examine certain traits and behaviors and aspects of human development. Well, basically, in order for them to verify or refute a hypothesis, they have to choose a research design. So, usually in human development, they choose either a scientific observation, and you're going to actually conduct one of those observations. In a perfect world, you would be actually going to a lab and observing children in their natural habitat, which is a preschool, um, acting and behaving, and record your observation. Um, Another way or another strategy is to conduct an experiment where you actually devise a hypothesis and plan an experiment where you have a control group and a experimental group, and you see what happens if you apply this variable and what happens if you don't apply it. A third strategy is to do a survey where you just collect data and information based on people's questionnaire. So let's look at a scientific observation and see what it requires. Basically, it requires you to record the behavior objectively. And objectively is a very important word because you want to take yourself out of it. You want to specifically write down what the child or what the person is doing without really connecting emotionally, without that subjectivity of, well, I bet he's doing this because kind of thing. It can be done in a naturalistic setting, like we said, in a child development center, at a preschool, or just watching kids on the playground if I was doing my research on children. Or it could be a setup in a laboratory where you can actually bring in the child and with a parent and expose them to a particular, let's say, setup of interaction with a stranger or the toy, and record your observation and what the child does. Of course, scientific observation sometimes is a precursor to doing an experiment because you have noticed something, and based on that thing, you can come up with a hypothesis or an educated guess of why they might be doing that. And then after that, you kind of devise your experiment to figure out the answer to the why. The limitation of a scientific observation is basically that you can't really tell why they're doing this until you do an experiment. So it's basically just telling us what we see, but doesn't tell us why we're seeing it. So it doesn't give us a cause for the behavior. An experiment establishes that causal relationship amongst the variables. So there's usually two types of variables: the independent variable, which is the experimental one, the one that I can manipulate, and the dependent variable, the one that changes based on whatever I do with the independent variable. And there's usually an experimental group and a comparison group or a control group. So let's take, for example, this experiment, which actually was conducted, is chewing gum before a test, something that could improve the students' test scores. So many students participated, and they were placed into two groups. One group was the experimental group, and another group was the comparison group. Of course, you need to make sure that both of them are mixed, made up of the same mix, gender-wise, socioeconomic status, age, all of those things need to be neutralized. And then you apply your independent variable. You give one group gum before the exam, and the other group doesn't get anything. And then you record your results. And the outcome, which is in this case the scores, becomes basically your dependent variable. So if they ate the gum, did they perform better? And if they did not eat the gum, did the scores change? So you compare the two, and in this particular experiment, the results showed that chewing gum immediately before the test did actually improve their ability to retain the information and score better. All right, we said the last one was survey, and survey is basically collecting information from a number of people by interviewing them or giving them a questionnaire. The problem with surveys, I don't know about you, but you lose me at the third question. I give up too fast, I get bored too easily, and I start to bubble in just the first answer for all of them to get it over with. So acquiring valid data becomes really the problem with surveys. Now, when we talk about studying human development, you have to take into consideration that human development is something that is not static. It's continuous. So how can we study humans across the age span? So change over time, how can we do that in this particular science? Well, we do this through one of three different research designs. The first one is called a cross-sectional research, and this is where we compare a group of people of one age with a group of people of another age, and we see if there is an improvement in the skill based on the age. So 5-year-olds are not as good as 25-year-olds when it comes to controlling their impulses. A 5-year-old might blurt out an answer, interrupt you 5 times, share their feelings, get upset or cry, whereas 25-year-olds might be able to actually give you a better attention span, might take longer, it takes them a shorter time to give you answers, and so forth. So this is an example of a cross-sectional research to study a particular trait or behavior. The next type is what we call longitudinal research, and this one is studying the same group of people over a period of time. So I'm going to choose this person and follow that person throughout the lifespan to see how did they change over time. Now, the problem with this one is that you cannot really follow the same group of people throughout their lifespan and be able to retain the same group of people throughout the lifespan. People opt out, people change, move, researchers die, things change, and that's why we have very limited number of longitudinal research in human development compared to the other types of research designs. The cross-sequential research is a combination of both. So this type of research applies the first one, which is the cross-sectional. So we study people of different ages. So we get 2 groups or 3 or 4 groups of people from different age groups, and then we follow them for a period of time, and this is where we combine the longitudinal part, and then we combine the results. This kind of helps us collect information about what can be applicable to age and what could be shared based on that human nature that combines all ages, that spans across all humans regardless of their age. Now, of course, as there are benefits to developmental science, there's always some pitfalls that we want to keep away from and be cautious about. And this is very important when we talk about not falling trap into correlation and causation. Correlation exists between 2 variables. So when we did that, for example, the gum research, we want to make sure that the results came better on the test because they ate the gum. So this is where we say it caused the improvement in their test scores. Correlation, however, is having both variables happen at the same time. So none of them is causing the other. It just they happen to appear or coexist at the same time. So a correlation exists between two variables if one variable is more likely or less likely to occur when the other one does. Just because two variables are correlated does not mean that they are causaceous. They are related in a way that one causes the other. This is very critical when we talk about vaccination. At one point, people were refusing to vaccinate their children because they were misled to believe that vaccination caused autism. And therefore, the relationship between autism and vaccination was refuted by scientists, and it was found that there is a correlation between the two, that around the same time that children start to get their vaccination routine is when the signs of autism usually are more visible and more diagnosed. And this showed that there is a correlation between the two rather than causation. Now, with subjects like humans, when we talk about the science of human development, we're dealing with human beings, and therefore there has to be a very strict boundary of ethics, because the subjects that we're dealing with are human beings and the harm cannot be undone. So ethics is basically kind of stressing that there has to be safeguards when we apply an experiment and have human beings as the subjects. The first and most important is that we will never harm those subjects. So do no harm to the subject, and that the fact that that subject has the right to be informed and have the ability to stop or opt out at any time during the period of the experiment. The second safeguard is that there will always be integrity in my reporting. So as a scientist, I have an obligation to use methods that are they're not harmful, but also that are promoting accuracy in my results, and that I'm not altering the results so that they can benefit me, so I can publish a research that is not factual. So two very important ethical safeguards are usually followed, and I want to say the organization that really oversees this is usually a review board that is always made up of very well respected people, especially in educational and medical institutions, that kind of guarantee that those ethics are followed and protected when they do research on humans.